What's up, guys? Welcome to the Young Adults Today virtual conference. This is one of our first full main sessions, and we are so excited. I'm going to introduce our guest. Grant Skeldon is a friend of ours. We're so thrilled that he is joining us. And in response to millennials being labeled things like non-committal, lazy, entitled, even slacktivists, he started Initiative Network with the goal to unite and train young leaders to be three things: Christ-loving, city-changing, church investing, and disciple-making local missionaries. That's incredible. And Initiative Network has united and accelerated some of the most diverse and dynamic next-gen leaders from across the country and across the globe. Grant's also an author of his own book called The Passion Generation. I can't highly recommend it enough. He's written everywhere from the Wall Street Journal, Relevant, the Gospel Coalition. He serves on the board of Catalyst. You may have heard of Catalyst, as well as most recently, he became the Next Gen Director for Q Ideas. And Grant, we don't want to take up any more of your time, but will you just have some fun with us for a second? And just, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm out in Denver right now. I was actually ironically just talking to Andrew Matrone, and I heard you bring him up. It's cool that he's going to be plugged in as well. We might be hanging out later tonight.
Let's go. Just, it has to be, I think, after 7 p.m. our time. Okay.
Yeah.
Deal?
I know. Yeah.
Oh,
It's gonna
hilarious.
be a late night.
Amazing. Well, I'll just say this. You want to say anything?
No, go ahead. You're doing great.
I'll just say this. Grant is going to do two parts. We're first going to just mute ourselves, Micah and I are, and we're going to link together, and he's going to share a message. And then after he does, he's going to just tip us back off, and we're going to have an opportunity to do Q&A. And he told me, man, that's my sweet spot. So Grant, again, thanks for joining us. I'm going to go on mute and take it away, my friend.
Awesome. Hey guys, I'm gonna start in prayer. It's just kind of like, I just always gotta start in prayer. I feel like Samson without my hair. So if you guys would join me, I'd love to pray. God, I pray for each person listening right now, and just if they're sacrificing the time to be a part of this, it means they probably have sacrificed a lot of time, energy, prayer, just their heart for the young people that you have a heart for. Young people, whether they're running from you, ashamed of you, just on fire for you, trying to search for if you're the right way, if there's something better, or those that are just, again, just convinced there's nothing else better in the world than you, God. But I want to bless those that are listening, those that are really, like you say in Luke 10, they're praying for more laborers, God. There's so much to do, and there's so few that are focused on this. So thank you for Josiah. Thank you for just the leaders that are putting their hand to the plow and trying to reach the next generation. I pray that you give them unbelievably unique favor over the next week. I pray that you give them unique insight. I pray that you give them a deeper compassion for the next generation, and just a type of authority that's new and fresh this year. To stretch us. The more and more I see, especially Gen Z, the more I'm convinced that they don't want anything that's catered for Christians as much as they want us to just truly seek after your presence and give it all, even if it will cost us, God. Bring us back to the heart of undeniably giving everything back to you, God. Forgive us for when we get in the way. And forgive us for when we try to take things in our own hand. God, I pray that you would use the words that I say. There's a lot of tips, maybe even tricks and things that we can try to do. But God, I pray that anything that is said just really comes out of what you modeled in your son. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so I wanted to talk about comparison. There's no way I'm not going to talk about the second thing. I'll say the second thing for a second. But I just think I'm not saying anything new when I say to you guys that probably the most subtle, silent killer to the next generation is comparison. And I think it's such a killer to us in that I don't think we've done a good job in ourselves, and especially for the next generation, to like hate comparison, to just like to fight it like they would fight other sins. And I want to tell a quick story. I just recently got married, and before that, though, I was living in a neighborhood just wasn't the safest neighborhood. It was we were purposely living in this neighborhood to reach a pretty difficult, just far from God community. But we loved it so much. However, like me and two other roommates lived in this pretty ghetto neighborhood, and our families all were concerned that we were living in this area. And so I think our worst fears, or our parents' worst fears, came to life when one night at around 2 a.m. I'm up late and I hear something outside of my window, which is the first floor, and I hear basically, I guess what I didn't know what it was, but it basically was a bicycle pulling up in front of my place. And in front of my place at 2 a.m. in the morning, there's several. It's just a parking lot, basically a small parking lot for the apartment complex. But there's several of our cars out there, and this guy gets off of his bike, and I'm like, again, it's interesting to be riding a bike at like 2 a.m. in the morning. But he stops, gets off his bike, and basically he starts going up to one of the cars. I'm like, okay, I guess he rode his bike to his car, and he's trying to open the door, but the door didn't open. And I was like, okay. Then I see him go to the next car, and he tries to open that door. And I'm like, okay, surely he doesn't own both these cars. And then he goes to the third car and tries to open the third car. And I'm like, okay, clearly this guy doesn't own any of these cars. He's just trying to get into these cars. Um, and the worst was the fourth car was my best friend's car. Like the guy who was the best man at my wedding, it was his car. And there was like this part of me that comes over me. I don't know if you ever had an experience where someone was outside of your home, you knew they weren't invited, or they were trying to break in to your home or into your property. But you could have all these ideas of what you would do in that situation. I didn't even know what I would do, but something just like took over me, that I'm in my boxers. Like that's it. That's all I got on. And I open the window and jump out the window, and quickly, I don't know what I didn't even know when I was jumping out the window, this is what I was going to do. It just all happened really quick. Is I'm like, I've got to frighten this guy. So I grab his bicycle, and I don't want to I threw it as high as I could to just crash onto the ground. And I just shouted, like, what the heck are you doing, man? Because I'm thinking, as the adrenaline is pumping, I'm thinking this guy could have a gun, this guy could have a knife, this guy could try to fight me. I don't know what. I need to scare him. I think like I'm in Colorado, like they tell you when you get out into the mountains, and if you see a bear, just try to act big. I'm like, I don't know how big you can really act, but you got to act like you're strong. And so I just was trying to act big, I guess, for this robber. And luckily he was scared and he freaked out. He didn't hear me come out of the window and grab his bike. So when that bike came crashing down, he was startled by that. And then me shouting at him, basically, he didn't even try to get his bike. He just ran away. Thank God. And so as that's happening, even I'm shouting to my friends, yo, we're getting robbed. I'm like, yo, we're getting robbed. And that there's a guy out there. And my friends start waking up, my best friends, and they're like, yo, what's happened? Like what? And I have to explain it to them. But I'm telling them, yo, this guy's just trying to rob us. And it kind of hit me recently as I'm thinking about comparison. The cliche quote on comparison is that comparison is the thief of all joy. For all you men out there on Pinterest, I'm sure you've seen it all over the place, where you see this quote of like, yeah, the comparison is the thief of all joy. And I would say it's more than just a thief of joy. It's trying to, again, steal us. It's trying to kill us. It's trying to destroy us. But the biggest thing is, I don't think we treat comparison like a thief. I think we treat comparison like this kind of bad habit that we hope can be better, but we're not really that sad that it's kind of still there. And it's kind of like we treat comparison like biting our nails or eating a little bit too much ice cream, or I don't know, like that we don't work out. It's like in the I want to do a little bit better. It's not in the this is going to destroy me. This is a robber and a thief that is trying to distract me, take from me. I look at it as, what if we took a better approach towards comparison as Christians, where we don't let so many of the stories in the Bible be instigated by comparison. Like if you think about Adam and Eve, they compare themselves to God, and it changes the way they live. Of course, Cain and Esau, Cain and Abel, comparison changes the way they live. Esau, it changes the way they live. Like Joseph and his brothers, it changes the way they live. Mary and Martha, like so many people in the Bible, it the way that they live for the worse. And I'm just wondering, like, we don't act like or treat it like that. And as you guys already know, the next generation struggles with comparison far more than our generation does. But our generation does a lot too. Like, it's not like, oh, youth and young adults are struggling with comparison and us as pastors and leaders aren't. I think we struggle on a whole different level of comparison. Like, we ironically compare ourselves to other people doing the same thing as we do for God's name. So I even just want to just address, like, we don't, as a next generation Christian leaders, like, I would bet that many of you guys that are listening right now, especially if you're focusing on the next generation and young adults or young singles, is I would bet that you are potentially the first young adult minister or pastor that your church has ever had. You're possibly been passed something on, but it really wasn't that strong to begin with. Or maybe you're like one of the few young people left at your church and they're like, yo, we actually realize all the young people are gone. So can you like change that? And it's like, yo, we should have been focusing on this like 20 years ago. Like, we have children's pastors, we have youth pastors, we have marriage pastors. Why would we not have young singles and young adult pastors? Like, even that's a question. So like, you're already kind of behind. And what I would say is why this matters is that we don't have the luxury. We don't have the luxury to be divided. We don't have the luxury to be so riddled by comparison. Unity is an absolute necessity for us. Like, we have to work together. I would assume, if you're not, I would just so encourage you to find other young adult pastors in your city, because like I can guarantee, I was from Dallas, Texas. The biggest young adult ministry in the nation, to my knowledge, is in Dallas, Texas. It's called The Porch. It reaches over 4,000 young adults in person in a normal year every Tuesday night. The leader of it and the founder of it, Jonathan Pekluda, very, very good friend of mine. And I was just thought, man, like, he had such a heart to help other young adult ministries thrive, because I think we knew there's so much more lost people. Yeah, it may be unbelievably impressive to walk into the building and be so encouraging to see that, yeah, there's 4,000 plus young people coming to church every Tuesday, but there's way more than 4,000 young people in Dallas. The harvest is still so plentiful and the laborers are still so few. And so I think the enemy wins so subtly because it just doesn't feel that bad to struggle with comparison. But I think that's what gets us into this problem where basically where we're like, I heard David Platt say this once, is we all are trying to raise God's name, but secretly and subtly, we're all trying to raise God's name, and we're hoping that our name raises with God's name. And so as we're working hard to raise his name, we're kind of disappointed when we in our name does. Ask you that, like, how often are you disappointed that your name isn't raised with God's name? Or are you totally okay with doing unbelievable things in your city for the next generation, but nobody knows that you are a part of it? Like, because I think the more we get into this place where I'm okay with you increasing and I'm okay with me decreasing, because we do truly, I really feel like Christian leaders are just like, we want God's name to increase. We just hope ours increases as well. And that's a real stumbling block. And in fact, I don't know how many of you guys are millennials, but I assume many are. I got a guy who's with me. He's taking a nap because he's been with me all day. His name's Colin LeBrosse. If you do have youth that are on TikTok, I would highly recommend you to look him up. He has over 500,000 young people following him on TikTok. His name's Colin LoBrosse, and Micah knows him. He's formerly from Minneapolis, just moved to Nashville. I'm just kind of taking him under my wing as he's getting speaking gigs, but hasn't really spoken that much. He's just blown up on TikTok, and therefore having people wanting to hear his voice. He's incredible with the next generation. Well, what I found is I'm feeling more and more like the old guy and less like the young guy. But as any of you guys know, you probably know what it feels like to be the youngest guy in the room, the youngest girl in the room. And then for me, I'm starting to hang out with Gen Z because I'm like, we got to focus on them. But the more I hang out with them, the more I feel like a youth pastor and less I feel like the young guy. And this really happened maybe 3 years ago. I was speaking at the biggest event I've ever spoken at. It was about 60, 70,000 people in the audience. And it was a 15-minute message. It was like a crusade type of event. And again, I was from Texas, so Texas is just ridiculous with its numbers. And all that to say is 2 days before the event, they told me, hey, Grant, I know we told you you're going to get 15 minutes, but actually, would you be okay with doing a panel? We want to do a next gen panel instead of your message just to the next gen. And I'm like, I don't feel like I could say no. And of course, like, yeah, let's do it. And so I'm like, I'm just curious, who's the other next gen leader? I was 29 at the time. So this, yeah, 2 years ago, and it was right before the pandemic. And basically the other leader was a 19-year-old kid. He was this missionary high school kid that was like mobilizing literally hundreds of kids towards missions, and it was incredible, like what he was doing, really killing it for his age. And what was so funny is they asked me the first question on the panel. They said, Grant, I want you to talk about why it's so important for us to reach the next generation. And so naturally, I started talking about the next generation. I started talking about millennials, blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, it was good. But then the next guy gets asked, hey, why do you think it's so important for us to reach the next generation? And this kid just had an anointing on him. And 19-year-old kid just starts talking. And one thing he says, though, in the middle of his thing, and he said, one thing I do want to say, because when we say next generation, I do want us to, as leaders, to start thinking about this is when we talk about next generation, I can't tell you how many times I hear about millennials, but he's like, the reality is Gen Z is the next generation. He's like, we're entering into college, we're into high school. He says, what keeps happening over and over again, it seems like, is we don't start talking about and focusing on the next generation until they're almost all out of the house, out of church, and they're gone. Instead of while they're in the church, in the home, and they're in their schools, and we could truly influence them. And so he's like, as much as I like talking about older generations, and he's saying this, and he's kind of saying older generations, pointing at me. He's like, as much as I love talking about older generations like millennials, we got to start talking about the next generation, like Gen Z. And I'm like, yo, I am 29 years old, and you're calling me the old generation, like for real? Like I'm already got to be the old guy. I was like, we just finally are starting to get a seat at the table, kind of barely, like by force. And I thought to myself, this is what it must feel like when Saul kind of had David come up. Is like Saul does all this, the crowd loves him, and then basically David shows up, and everything was really good until he came home, and people are saying, hey, Saul has his thousands, but David has his tens and thousands. And that to me is a picture perfect example of you were on the same team, you were unified. The only thing that caused things to change was you started comparing yourself to, they still praised you, they still appreciated you, they were still thankful for you, they still sang songs for you when you came back to the city. They just gave more numbers to the next guy, the younger guy, the new guy. And I just wonder again, like, and it hit me, either I can choose to be like Saul, or I can, to the best of my ability, shift. Yo, I'm not even 30, but what if I could help, and what if we could help Gen Z and start finding them at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and setting them up like we wish Xers and boomers would have done, like for millennials when we were young. Because I feel like we really kind of had to fight to get a seat at the table. And even though they don't deserve it, just like, dang, David didn't deserve to fight Goliath. Like that dude wasn't even supposed to be on the battlefield. And even though they don't maybe even have the perfect skill set. But again, did David have the perfect skill set? I actually give a lot of props to Saul on the front end, is that, a lot of times that we don't give, the church doesn't give us young leaders big responsibilities. I feel like because they don't want to give us responsibilities that if we fail, then it messes everything up. But Saul gave David a huge responsibility. If you really think about it, it's probably the most powerful thing Saul did was he gave the biggest responsibility you could give to someone is, and he didn't even have the qualifications for it. Like if David failed, everything changed for Israel. They literally had to serve Israel. And so everything banked on and hinged on David. I actually personally believe that is why David never wanted to forsake Saul, because I think any young leader here, if you're probably especially a unique higher position as a young person, I would almost guarantee it's because someone older than you gambled on you, believed in you, put their neck on the line for you, saw something in you. And I know for me, I had guys and girls that saw things in me when I was 16, when I was at college around 19, started seeing speaking gifts and started seeing leadership gifts, started giving me big. I got asked to be a board member for a nonprofit when I was 19, and it was like, are you sure? Like, are you serious? It's those people now that could come back to me 5 years, 10 years later, and I'd be like, I'd run through a wall for them because of what they did. And in the same way, I think that that loyalty that would be had generation to generation, as long as we wouldn't let comparison be such a stumbling block and a thief, to and be something that would really stab at or poke at our insecurities of we need to get the credit. I want to finish with a quick story and then talk about what could we do instead. Is the beauty of it is, and I think you've probably heard this a lot, but I truly believe a divided nation needs a united church. I think that means we're going to have a lot of just security in our identity. Like, God, I'm trying to do the best I can do just today. And I'm going to love who you put in front of me, and I'm going to do well, whatever the job you put in front of me. But when I think about unity, and I think about the conversation of unity, it often could be tied to race, but I would tie it to race, denomination. Like when I think of Satan hearing Jesus say, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church. If I was Satan, I'd be like, yo, spoiler alert, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church. That means that the church is on the offense, not the defense, but the church is on the offense, and Satan's gates can still not even hold us back as believers. If we're unified, if we are his church, not my church and your church and this guy's church and that church, but it's like we are one church. We are God's church. We are working for him. He's the one who gets all the credit. He's the team that we're on. We don't care who scores the most points, because at the end of the day, we're on the same team. We don't care who gets the most cheers, because at the end of the day, we're on the same team. When he scores, I actually score. Like when they win and when you win, I win. Like the only people that suffer when we are riddled by comparison and not really pursuing unity is we don't do as big of things and see as big of things as we could. But especially lost people are the people that suffer. They're the ones that don't get to be impacted because of us. Like, think about how much would it have affected Israel and David and Solomon and Absalom if Saul was secure in who he was and was like, yo, my time isn't over actually, but my stage and my role is shifting a little bit. Like, they could have killed it. They could have done incredible things together, but instead it cascaded into such this like story of running and hiding and fighting and just so toxic. And I'm like, man, is that not where we are today? Like the enemy cannot defeat us. And so I'm convinced he knows if he can't defeat us, he tries his hardest to divide us. And so as us, is again, like, how can we be on guard and alert to anything where we see the enemy is trying to defeat us, and anything that he's trying to do to divide us, anything he's trying to do to get us, especially to compare ourselves to other leaders, to where we get to a point where it's like, yo, I'm not comparing myself to you. I'm celebrating when you win, because when you win, I win. Like, at the end of the day, the people that get the biggest things, like the Billy Grahams of this world and the big names, that we all like, man, if I could only be a pastor, preacher, speaker like this guy one day, like, even those guys, like at the end of the day, they will go to heaven and they will cast their crowns before God. They get all the points, if you will, but even them will cast their crowns. So like, what's the point? What's the point for fighting for the recognition here on earth when that's just not really going to matter in eternity? And so what I've thought about, especially when it comes to unity, and we're not talking about just the divisions that the enemy tries to do with race, generation, denomination. But when I think about race, we can sometimes make this unity conversation like it's a hard thing, or it's like, oh man, it's hard to talk about race. Or, I'm half Mexican, so I get put on a lot of race panels. The last 5 years have been the years of race panels. I've never been on so many race panels. It's usually a black guy, a white guy. I get to be the Mexican guy. There's some Asian guy. If we're lucky, where I can invite a female on, and like panels. And I've thought lately is like, it's not, we shouldn't be guilted into racial unity, generational unity. We're actually should be like kind of like inspired into it. Like, we're missing out by not having it. I told you, I just got married 3 months ago, and I thought about weddings more and more, and thought about what kind of wedding I wanted to have. I don't know if y'all noticed this, but like depending on what ethnicity is getting married is the kind of wedding it's going to feel like and be like. And they start to become very predictable when you just go to like monolithic weddings. And what I mean is like if a white person who mostly only spent time with white people and then married another white person who time with white people, or black who only spent with black people, another black mostly spent time with black people, it's gonna just like it starts to be predictable. It's like, okay, I'm going to a black wedding, it's gonna be like this, a white wedding, it's gonna be like this. For example, not 100%, please give me grace on this, but a lot of times I found in white weddings, when I went to a ton, I felt like at a lot of white weddings, it's like so predictable. I always knew there's gonna be a lot of Pinterest vibes at this wedding. There's gonna be a lot of like wooden vibes, a lot of twine, and yeah, again, like just rustic wood. It's gonna have a vibe. But I always knew at a white wedding, the most predictable thing is I just knew it is the music is gonna be so predictable. Like without a doubt, one of the first 2 or 3 songs that's gonna play is a song called Cupid Shuffle. Or what's the song? It's Cupid Shuffle. What's the one that's like clap your hands, like everybody clap your hands. The cha-cha slide. Uh, Here's what I found is white people love dancing to songs at weddings that give instructions, basically. Like they love songs that give instructions. It's like everybody clap your hands. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, thank you. It's like I needed to know what to do, or if slide to the left. Okay, what do I do next? Slide to the right. Okay, thank God for this guy. He's like basically narrating what I'm supposed to do. Or to the left, to the left, to the left. Okay, when do I change? Oh, good. He's saying to the right, to the right. It's like so predictable. It's gonna be that. And my girl, who is white, would always be like, babe, come on, dance. I'm like, babe, I can't. I hate this song. I hate that this is the big song at every wedding. But you know, if I went to a black wedding, the music is legit. I'm like, yo, the music, I'm gonna learn some new songs. I'm gonna learn some new dance moves. I will say the last 2 black weddings that I went to, though, they did not start on time. And I know there's a stereotype around that, but for me, even experientially, they did not start on time. I even went to an Ethiopian wedding because there's CP time or colored people time. And then there's like African time. That's like, it was literally an hour and a half late. But the music, the food, I mean, as a Mexican, if you go to a Mexican wedding, I joke, but I'm serious, is the quality could be just falling apart, but we're just having a good time. Like Mexicans can have the best time no matter what, and the food is like on point. And so my point is this: is like every expression of the wedding through the culture has its great, incredible things, and then it has these like, oh, okay, that's gonna be odd or weird or whatever. But what I love these days is when I go to multiracial weddings. It's like whether it's 2 diverse people marrying each other, therefore they're diverse cultures coming together. So cool to see those 2 worlds come together. Or it could just be 2 of the same ethnicity, but they were unbelievably intentional with diverse relationships, and they come together and they create this diverse expression of love. It's just awesome. Like the wedding starts on time, the music isn't predictable, it's awesome, on point, everyone has a good time, it's incredible, it's awesome. And that's, I think, what is supposed to happen for us is like if we could be unified, that's when people see the church. Like that's when the world will know that you are my disciples, when you love one another. And we they say that this idea of like color blind, but color blind is missing out on the beauty of, like, I heard Darren Gray once say this, is like it's not healthy to be color blind. You actually should see the differences, embrace the differences, leverage the differences, and instead of being colorblind, be color blessed. And I think that's what can happen when we are more unified, more secure in who God has made us, that we can walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which God has called us, or you walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which God has called you, and you're fine when other people walk in a manner worthy of the calling which God has called them. It's like, I love that God is using you in that way. I love that God is using me this way. And I've actually even found the more secure you are in who you are, the more trust you in more things. But the more we're like, just, I don't know, trying to bust down doors, I think it's greater to have a posture of David, where it's like, this is what the kid I'm discipling, Colin, said. He's like, I try to live a life where I'm not trying to bust doors down that God didn't open. I want to be like David, where just I get requested. It's like he didn't even know to bust down that door. He didn't even know that was an option. but he had this opportunity to just keep getting requested. And so lastly, I'll just say in closing, how do we do that for the next generation? Is I just think it's so important, disciple. I get asked a lot, what's the best thing you could do for the next generation? And we could add a lot of tips and tricks on how to reach the next generation on music, worship, leadership, how to preach. If we really want to waste our time, how to dress and how to make things look cool and relevant and graphics and all that. And I'm not saying none of those things matter. Like for a time they do, but I think you guys, if you guys are on TikTok, it's funny how much like, or apparently skinny jeans, which we got such a hard time by the older generation, is now not cool to Gen Z. And I always used to say is like, you don't want to attach your model to tips and tricks that maybe work for 5 or 10 years, and then something else comes along. But if you can tie it to something timeless, which is discipleship, it's what God told us to do. It's what Jesus did, and it's his last words. Therefore, I think it should be our first priority. I just think that discipleship is the most powerful, timeless thing we could ever do for the next generation. And it's where we get to pour in to people in their identity and their security and their relationship with God, their intimacy with God, their daily devotion to God. And a real quick thing of how I see that these days is like, we spend so much time thinking discipleship is speaking or small groups, but I think we've really not maybe got distracted, but I think we put way too many eggs in the basket of teaching, especially, and small groups. I think those things are good and necessary and are never going away. But I think the more robust power of the future of the church will be in discipleship. Just one person taking one person or 2 or 3 or 4 or however many you feel like in a healthy way you can disciple. The more, the better. That I think is the future of reaching the next generation. They got enough people trying to saturate them with content. Everywhere they go, they got companies and industries spending billions of dollars on how to get them to hear them, listen to them, watch this, buy this, come and see this, whatever. We're just joining the whole crowd when we're like, guys, you don't want to miss it. Come back next week. This new sermon series is like, for me, I can't stand being like a hype man and feeling like in order to be a Christian leader, I got to be a really good speaker, a really, really good event coordinator for the best events, and then the best hype man, a club promoter, where I'm just like, come on, guys, next week. You don't want to miss it. Like we always do that with our hands when we're promoting the next thing. And I mean, we got to do some of that, but that's not all of it, man. I think the fruit, the core is, I don't care if we have a whole bunch of people that know how to preach, if we don't have a lot of people that are making disciples. Like Jesus had 5,000 people, just men, and we don't even know with women and children. And it was really telling of me when I'm trying to look at is Jesus that he leaves the 5,000 chunks the dudes, worst follow-up ever, and just gets in a boat with the 12 and keeps discipling them. And it really struck me. I'm like, man, we as the American church put so much emphasis on the big event, the big gathering, who's able in this city to gather the most people. And that's like the big dog in town. And Jesus was like that for a millisecond. And it's like, okay, deuces, I'm a disciple as well. It's like not saying that the gathering's unimportant. It's just saying that discipleship is more important, in my opinion. We are here because the 12 far more than we are here because the 5,000. And so I'm not saying again to neglect it. I'm just saying if you're doing one without the other, yeah, I really think you're missing it. And the more you make disciples, the more you're going to see a larger gathering, a more robust gathering, a presence of God gathering, because those people that are gathering have been filled throughout the week and poured into throughout the week, and hopefully have poured into others. And so what I would finish with is, if we could get less leaders saying, come and listen to me, and more leaders saying, hey, can you come and meet with me? Like, I want to meet with you regularly, whether it's once a week, once a month, even once a quarter, or even better than saying, come and listen to me, or even come and meet with me, is, can we get more Christians in the church saying, come and follow me? Just, if we could just add that metric, I think it would change the game of the American churches. We have a lot of churches that know their attendance really well. They know that metric. They know their baptisms every year. They know their giving every year. What you count and what you celebrate creates your culture. And if you're counting baptisms and you're counting attendance and you're counting giving, but you're not counting discipleship, you don't have a measurement for discipleship yet, I would highly encourage you. What you count and what you celebrate creates your culture. And what you count and what you measure tells you what matters most to you. And if we want to tell our people that discipleship matters, I think we need to start measuring discipleship, which is going to force us to define it, which is going to force us to create paths for it, which is going to force us to even really culturally shift what matters and even who the heroes are in our church. But what we're currently doing is not working. 7 out of 10 young people are leaving the church once they enter into college. The ones that actually stick around are the ones that usually were discipled. And so it's the move. If I can say this without you guys getting too like politically, as I'm in no way endorsing either president, but I always joke, if I could make a campaign, I would have, for the church, I would have put a red hat on and I would have said, make the commission great again. Like, can we simply just make the commission great again? Because we already have a great commission. And we actually have a generation that wants to be a part of something unbelievable. We have the most cause-oriented generation in the world right now. They're dying to be a part of a cause. It's not hard to get young people to care about a cause. So I'm just curious why the most cause-oriented generation in the world right now is not connecting the most cause-oriented organization in the world right now, the church. And I'm at a point where I'm convinced, I think the most cause-oriented generation in the world right now does not connect to the most cause-oriented organization in the world right now, because we kind of neglect our cause. Like Jesus did not spend the majority of his time trying to get people to listen to him, but he spent a lot of time discipling people and telling them to go disciple others. And I think the more we get to there, you'll figure out that maybe we actually don't have a next gen problem. Maybe what we really have is a discipleship problem. And the more we fix that discipleship problem, the more we'll see the next generation be less of a problem, because we've discipled into them the things that used to be problems. But if we don't disciple the next generation, they're going to be like Lord of the Flies. It's going to be a wreck. Be just doing what is right in their own eyes. They desperately need us, and I would say likewise, we desperately generations before. The best, mature, godly, humble young leaders I know, almost always unbelievably older leaders, just great, incredible, godly people that poured into them, gave on them. And my hope is, what if we multiplied that, and what if we came back to God of, hey, this is what you did, this is what you said. Your last words are going to be our first priority. That's all I got. Thank you, Josiah. Sorry. Thank you for having me, bro.
Yeah, what a great reminder, and what a great conglomeration of golden nuggets. Hopefully everybody took something from what you just said, or was moved by something, or something that they can, change in their ministry. Definitely. And apply something different, to see it through a different lens and just hear your perspective specifically. And we're just going to move into a time of Q&A. So for anybody tuning in and listening, Grant has about 15 minutes to answer any question you have. And Grant, if you want us to read the questions, or if you want people to raise their hands, thumbs up, you can definitely call on them, and you guys
we could do both.
Yourself.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do both. I appreciate when they ask it themselves, because then I could just see them and talk to them. But I know some people they want to send it in, they prefer that. So whatever works.
Cool. So
depending on the person.
Yeah. Thank you, Grant, for your willingness. I'll say this, we'll read the ones that get typed into the chat.
Great.
Her and I will. And then also, if you raise your hand, Grant will actually call on you. But first, he gets to call on Micah. She's got a question to kick us off.
Okay, so Grant, I know that you were asking us on the podcast about marriage and how did you know when you knew, and all those different kinds of things. But if you could describe your new bride in 3 words, how would you describe her for the audience today?
Which, P.S., congrats.
Yes, congrats, by the way.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Definitely focused, devoted, and it's different. Like focused, I would apply that to work. She's one of the most hardworking people I know. Devoted would be like, she's doing Tara Lee Cobble's Year Through the Bible. It usually requires about 4 chapters a day, and I'm just like, I tried to do it with her, and I lasted maybe 3 days. And so I'm like, babe, 45 minutes a day. I'm like, I just respect, no matter what time she goes to bed at night and what time she needs to wake up, she's up to spending that time with God. But devoted, and then I just say childlike faith. I know that's not a word exactly, it's a long word, but she definitely brings out a childlike faith in me, which I appreciate about her.
That's amazing. So guys, this is the interactive part. This is why we put this session on Zoom. So feel free to raise your hand. He will call on you, as well as you can type them into the chat, and I'll kick us off. I got a text message from one that somebody said, I can't ask my question due to my room setup, but they texted it to me, and they said, in an overly booked, overly busy culture, what does discipleship look like for
That's great.
Skeldon?
Yeah. So for me, I kind of that differentiation. I think church is usually saying, "Come and listen to me." Mentorship is saying, "Come and meet with me," and discipleship is saying, "Come and follow me." Mentorship is incredible. I think all of us have been highly impacted by people that even met with us one time and said a couple nuggets that changed the way we see God, see ourselves, see the Scripture, just changed all that. And then, but discipleship, where it's different, is like you can meet with someone one time and be mentored by them, even if it's like one meeting, or ideally several meetings to be mentored. But discipleship is like when you join their life. There's pros and cons to mentorship and discipleship. The con to mentorship is that you don't get to see their life. You just get to see them in a meeting, which kind of like church is like we get to see them speak on stage, but we don't know what these guys are like with their family. We don't know what they're like with their employees. We don't know what they're like with strangers. We don't know if their neighbors even know their name or if they know their neighbor's name. Like we don't know those things. But if you go into discipleship, the con is it's so much more kind of, you could say, invasive. You're now letting someone into your world. I always tell people there's 4 quadrants of your life that commonly are easy to invite people to, or one of them got to be your personal life, which is your hobbies, the things you like to do. Invite someone young into that world, or it's maybe your family life. We got one of the most fatherless and divorced cultures. Them coming into your world, even if you might feel like, well, my family's not perfect, or I'm not the best husband, I'm not the best wife, I'm not the best mom, I'm not the best dad, but you are striving after Christ. And even if you're failing 7 times and getting back up, God, that was the most impactful. I got discipled 2 weeks after I got saved, and getting to see a man pursuing his wife's heart and his kid's heart, and not just like passively being there and making money for the family, but that was it. He was like, my father was emotionally and spiritually not the leader. And that's a big normalcy among millennial and Gen Z, where it's like, they haven't seen that. And I just remember seeing that, because they say discipleship is caught more than it's taught. And I remember seeing that at 16 as a new believer and thinking, man, I want to be a husband like Kevin Batista one day. I want to be a father like Kevin Batista one day. Even though he never told me you should be like me, I just saw things he did. And so maybe joining your personal life, maybe your family life, maybe your church life, it's serving with you, maybe every now and then coming to your small group, or coming, especially if they can come on a mission trip with you or something like that. And then fourth, I would also say your work life. I mean, in my setting right now, I'm doing a big dinner in Denver for about 40 unique high caliber leaders in the Denver area. And I'm bringing a 23-year-old with me, like anytime. Then we're going on a retreat. That's a very elite retreat with some very elite leaders. And he's definitely going to be, by like at least 8 to 10 years, the youngest guy there. I would have been the youngest guy there if I didn't invite him. But again, I could have been, and that would have been cool. But what if I could get him? And then now he starts bringing his friends next year. And so I trying to bring them in. The doors you're going to open, the wisdom they're going to get at a younger age than we got. So what it looks like is, yeah, I'm trying to include. I always say mentorship is adding something to your calendar, which is hard. I know for many of you guys, if you're married, you have kids, you got a full-time job, the last thing you're thinking about is how do I add one more thing to my calendar. So I always say mentorship is adding something to your calendar. And if you can do a regular meeting with someone, do mentorship. But if maybe you're like, I don't have the time, which is a very common excuse for not discipling, and a very warranted excuse for discipleship, for the lack of discipleship. And that's why I say, well, do discipleship, not mentorship. You might be confusing what I think is mentorship, of meeting with someone. And instead, I would say disciple someone. If you don't have time, disciple them instead. You got to be open to them seeing you fall, and they got to be open to them seeing your life's not perfect. But that's actually the real faith that they're looking for. The kid I'm discipling, he's always saying, like, I took a nap before he took a nap, and he took a video of me taking a nap. He's like, I said, bro, don't post that. He's like, that's real life, man. That's what Gen Z wants to see. I'm like, all right, man, didn't go ahead. I'm like, I don't want him to see me napping. But he keeps taking the worst video of me. And I think, but yeah, it is. I mean, I heard John Maxwell once say, if you want to impress people, share your successes. But if you want to impact people, share your failures. I mean, if you really want to impact people, I'd add to that, share what you do and especially what God does with you after your failures. Man, that's what no one gets to see. That's why we have a cancel culture in a lot of ways. And so, again, if mentorship is adding something to your calendar, then discipleship, in my opinion, is including someone in your calendar. That means you get to do everything you've done. You just got to find a young person that's hungry enough to join your world. And the great thing is, as you get older, you have these golden handcuffs. Like, I know that I just lost something I used to value so much. I tell young singles, you have this window of time that the enemy's going to get you to hate, but it's one of the best things you can have. And you're going to be dying to get married, but really this time is the time after you no longer have to ask your parents for permission, and you don't yet have to ask your wife for permission. You can just go and do things. And it's awesome. I was like, and I just lost it 3 months ago. I used to be able to go do whatever, buy whatever. Now I'm like, I wanted to buy something yesterday on Amazon for like over $50. And now I got to ask her, hey, can we do this? Like, I used to be able to just go do that. And so don't hate that time. Singleness truly can be a gift. But the enemy would want you to waste that and just spend time with your own generation, just chill. And I would say, man, if you have time, which they do, we don't have time, but we do have wisdom. And so that's the thing, is that we get our wisdom and use the time that they have to join our life. It doesn't work for everyone. Not every next gen person is ready to be discipled, but there are hungry ones that make themselves available. And when I find someone like that, like this kid's never said no to anything I've invited him to, and I'll just keep inviting him to more and more. And he's going to keep receiving more and more because God's doing so much and opening so many doors for him. And so that's kind of what discipleship has looked like for me. It might look more like you inviting them into your family life or your personal life. For me, a lot of it has been my work life, but he's also trying to grow and being a speaker and leader. And so that's where I try to invite him into when I'm doing things around that arena.
Sheesh, Grant, you are insightful, man. And we've got a handful of questions with about 8 minutes left. So maybe we'll try to do 4, 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to do shorter answers too.
That was gold. And the first one, I'll just have Matt Martinez. He's got his hand up. He'll go first, and then I'll read a few.
Grant, thanks for sharing. Good insights. I really appreciate it. Love your emphasis on discipleship, mentorship. Seems to have a big impact in your life, and so you're trying to do the same. And I think you should probably get to others, because my question was just kind of maybe a little bit of your model for discipleship. And I think you kind of talked through a little bit about that, just how you approach it. And I think really I like that idea of including them in your calendar was really powerful to me. I thought, but if you have you can take us 30 seconds to answer anything else, any other thoughts, and then move on from my question. But thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I can share slides with you Josiah, and you could send it out. Or also, I did write a book called The Pastor Generation, and all these little steps, it is in there, like way more robust and way more in depth and way more practical than what I get to say here. But I will add one thing that's helpful too, and I didn't come up with this. I don't know who did, but there's these like 5 stages of discipleship or replication, and it's like step 1 is I do, you watch, and then step 2 is I do, you help. Step 3 is you do, I help. And so let's talk about like speaking, like with Colin LeBras here. I brought him to Dallas last week because I was speaking live at a conference, and when they did Q&A, I had him watch when I spoke, so he can kind of get an idea, because he'd never been with me at an event. But then I had him help, like I had him do Q&A with me. So I'm millennial and Gen Z, and there's some that he answered really well, and there's some I'm like, dude, they're not trying to hear that. Like they want to hear a little bit more down this lane. He's like, okay, and so the next breakout, he did even better. But it's like, again, I do, you watch, I do, you help. Now it's you're gonna do it, and I'm going to help you. So you still have a little bit of support. And then 4th is you do, I watch. It's like, okay, it's a little bit more on you. And then 5th stage is true replication, is you do, somebody else watches, and you're starting all over again. I think that's a powerful thing. So if you know what the person you're discipling wants to learn, especially a specific set of skills, maybe 1, 2, or 3 skills they want to learn, it does help you see that you truly have this process to put them on to get them to be able to do what you do.
Grant, that's amazing. So go check out his book if you want a little more in-depth response to that, for sure. We have somebody who also has a question. Who is influencing your understanding in Gen Z right now?
Gen Z, like it is Gen Z. I mean, I'm not a big fan. If you see my book, the slogan on the book on the back is enough statistics, let's talk solutions. And the reason I wrote a book as a millennial on how to reach millennials was because I felt like everyone was writing a book on millennials, but they just ironically weren't millennials. And that would be like a white person writing a book on how to reach Black people. And that's not to say a white person couldn't do an unbelievably great research on how to reach Black people. Just would feel a little odd. Or Micah, if a man like myself wrote a book on how to lead women in women's ministry, is like, I could do a lot of research and ask a lot of women questions, I guess, but it's like, it'd be interesting not to have a woman also as a voice in that, or the voice in that. And so I really try to make a practice of, I'm going to go to the people that I'm trying to learn about and just ask them and figure that out. And I would say, I mean, I do have a lot of key young leaders across the country I get to ask that are Gen Z. I'm doing a Gen Z retreat in a couple months, Lord willing, where it's about 25, 30 of the most high caliber young Gen Z leaders I know. And so I actually met with 5 of them yesterday to just talk about who should we be inviting to this thing. And but I would say, when I speak at a lot of conferences, or especially churches, there's always a small group of young millennials or Gen Z that are there listening, because I mostly speak to older generations about the next generation. And there's always a small group of young people. And I know that I would be the same way. They're always kind of judging me a little bit, like, okay, what is this guy going to say as he's teaching the older people at our church about us? And all I have to say is at the end of almost every message, the younger group comes up. He's like, at first we were questioning, because usually the older people bring me on. So that we were kind of skeptical of you, because we were told some young person's going to teach about young people. We've been here. They don't listen to us, blah, 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 blah. And they always say something like, but we liked what you said. And honestly, we've been saying a lot of what you've been saying to them anyway. And so I like to tell the older generation there is like, you should listen to your own young people that are here. They're free, they're present, they're a part of your church. And I would just highly encourage is find 2, 3, 4 young people that are present and start asking the hard questions, and don't apologize or defend when they critique things. I always say, let them critique some of the current strategies, but then let them create some of their own strategies. And then when they create it, I would give them responsibilities like, okay, you think that would work? Well, if I trusted you, I put my neck on the line and let you try that. Would you be down? And I feel like Jonathan McCluda, I've heard him once say this, or several times say this with the porch. He said, whatever young people help whatever young people help create, they'll help maintain. And so I'm always trying to group within the group that be like the feedback and the idea creator, and then give them the responsibility.
Grant, there's such power in what you just said of like a generation wants to be heard, to be listened to know that their voice matters, that it counts. And so 2 last questions. Have this one, and this one we're asking because it came in, and I get this question a ton. This is a very common question. This individual says that he's 23, leading a young adult ministry as a young adult. And he said, what's a nugget of wisdom for maybe a young leader who's leading people, and probably half the ministry might be older than they're leading, or older than them themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. A nugget of wisdom when they're younger than most of the others. As I'm getting older, which I'm not that old, but as I'm getting in my 30s, I do think I probably spent too much of my 20s thinking I needed to grow as a leader. And I know it's so cliche to say, but the best thing you have to offer older people in your church, even if they're 20, 30, 40 years older than you. But if you want to lead them well, I think the best thing you have to offer anybody as a leader is your intimacy with God. And so don't fully get distracted. You do need to grow as a leader. Like, you probably do need to grow a little bit as a speaker. You probably do need to grow as someone to create a culture in your staff and in your organization. Like, those things are not are non-negotiables. But God has a way of people that just have an unbelievable intimacy with Him, just stumbling into the right things to do, or a bubble of favor around them that God just leads people into a lot of the right direction. I've seen there's something about people that are just so devoted to God that a lot of the other tactical things kind of can fall into place. Again, I'm never saying one or the other, it's both and, but I do think as I'm getting older, I could be a great leader, but I need to have you never graduate needing more and more intimacy with God. And so I would tell you that's the best thing you probably offer if you're a little older than yourself.
Awesome. Grant, this is the last question we have time for today. But this is in regards to like mentorship / discipleship. And sometimes we come in and we have people who want to be discipled or mentored. And this individual is sharing that it's more or less giving young adults tasks rather than true discipleship happening. How can they combat this in an effective way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. To be clear, is he saying the church is more giving tasks but isn't really focusing on discipleship?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. You can't change it. I would say I'll tell you this is I used to spend a lot of time, even years, kind of mad at the generations before us, being like, you guys are critiquing us all the time and making fun of us and just so dumb, like your approach towards the next generation, participation trophies and just always talking about millennials in a negative way. I was like, you guys came up with participation trophies. Why y'all making fun of us? And we were like little kids when we were given this. We didn't know any better. And I used to always think, and why don't y'all disciple us? You guys always like, yeah, it's just like I used to say you can't expect what you don't invest a lot, and say you can't want us to grow up with. I mean, it's hard to grow up without grown-ups. That was like a common quote that I would say, and it was true. But as I've gotten older and just met more older leaders, what I've realized is it's not like millennials were the first generation to not get discipled. We have unfortunately been neglecting discipleship for a long time, and so what I found is. A lot of Xers weren't discipled. A lot of boomers weren't discipled. We've focused so much on evangelism and gathering without like, what do we do afterwards? And they almost treat it like coming to Christ is the line. Always, it's the point. It's now it's unbelievable that God for us, and it's crazy also that He's entrusted us to now join His work. But most people, unlike us, we're very blessed to be able to see that he didn't just save us. He like now wants to use us. That's crazy that He trusts us like that. And so, yeah, I would say we can't. One, I'd have more compassion on. It's hard for them to give what they never received. People that have been highly impacted by discipleship can't fathom not discipling because it's what changed their life. So I give grace to them, and then two, I would really try to encourage you. What I've tried to do is I try to train young people to trick older people into discipling them because they're intimidated by it. And so what I mean by that is I don't really always use the word discipleship when I'm telling young people to go ask someone to disciple them. I might just say, just find ways to join their world. Like if they like to, I have a guy that disciples me currently, and the way I tricked him into discipling me is he was so busy, unbelievable guy. The stuff he's in the boards is ridiculous. I just knew to run. So in his personal life, that's what I would encourage you. Find their personal life, the person you want to get discipled by, and find out what they like to do and just see if you could ever join them in it. Because usually they like doing their hobby with other people, or they like when people want to join their hobby. The guy I wanted to run with, pretty common story in my book is that I asked him, can I start running with you? And he told me, yeah, you can start running with me tomorrow. Are you free at 4? And I was like, oh my God, 4 like a.m. Are you serious? But I got up early, joined him, and basically it was 4 p.m. He wasn't even there. It was crazy. It was bad. But that guy is the guy I now joined. And so I would say, again, have grace. And then second, just find a way to join them. And eventually you'll start figuring out, actually, they are discipling you, even if it didn't start with the word discipleship.
Grant, Skeldon, thank you guys so much for linking in. And Grant, we just appreciate you so much for investing. What we would say is, man, check out his book, The Passion Generation. But Grant, once again, thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, man. Thank you so much.
You bet. And guys, we're going to,
Yeah,
you as well. And we're going to head now to YouTube. So the link is in YouTube. Make sure that you click the link, and we'll see you on YouTube shortly.